Welcome to another edition of the MDM podcast. I'm Mike Hockett, our executive editor. A little more than 2 years ago, I had Jeff Crane, the CEO of LGG Industrial, on the podcast to talk about his company's recent changes. At that time, the company was known as ERIKS North America, a well-known distributor of fluid handling, material conveyance, and sealing products and solutions. The company has undergone further transformation since, including its early 2024 rebrand as LGG Industrial. Crane and I were able to have a great chat at the 2025 NAHAD convention, and given what LGG has been up to lately, I was compelled to invite him back onto the podcast to discuss that rebrand and what went into it, how LGG is navigating the tariffs landscape, the company's recent branch network enhancements, and how LGG has approached AI so far. Enjoy. Jeff, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks very much, Mike. Nice to be with you.
Jeff, you and we recorded a podcast back in, I think it was March of 2023, at which time the company that you lead was still called ERIKS North America. And at that time, we discussed all the recent changes that the company had undergone around that time. About a year before then, the company had completed its divestment from Netherlands-based ERIKS NV and was really just finding its sea legs as an independent distributor. And there's certainly been more big changes since that podcast a year ago, the biggest of which was, I would say, is the rebranding of ERIKS to LGG Industrial at the start of 2024. We published a Q&A with you right after that rebranding news about the why behind it. And I don't want to make you rehash that whole conversation, but I do think that's the best place to dive in here. So first, let's get into that why. Jeff, why did ERIKS North America rebrand as LGG Industrial about 16 months ago?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. From just a practical standpoint, we were obligated legally to stop using the ERIKS name within a 2-year period after the divestiture. So there was a legal obligation that we had, but more important than that, we wanted a fresh start. We wanted to create a new identity. We had the opportunity to create a new path forward for the business on a number of fronts, and the rebranding was the most internal and externally visible way to show the market how excited we were about that new path forward. And so we embarked on the rebranding because we wanted to and we're excited to do it. And we couldn't be happier or more proud of how all of that came about. Lauren and our entire marketing organization and all sorts of people within the organization helped do a great job, not just with the practical transactional steps of signage and literature and those sorts of things, but I think we did a really great job of being thoughtful about what the name ought to be. It would have been easy to kind of go backwards and adopt the naming conventions that we had utilized in the past. And frankly, we did a little bit of testing on the Goodall name in Canada, the Lewis Getz name in the US markets, and both continued, even though we hadn't traded under those brands in some time, continued to be very positively viewed by the marketplace. But I actually think it was we did a lot of, internal and external investigations of different naming conventions and strategies. And I think it was an internal associate that said, Lewis Getz meant a lot to us at the time. And Goodall certainly meant a lot to us as a name under which we went to market. But the opportunity to do something new and different that reflects this new path forward and the new energy that we have as an organization would have been a real missed opportunity. And so I think we really bridged the gap between the strength of those historic brands and the excitement for the new path forward in the LGG Industrial brand. And as I said, just couldn't be happier and prouder of how that went.
I was about to ask you a follow-up of where did the LGG name come from? What does it actually represent as the acronym? But you really covered it right there because I had never asked someone from the company of, what went into that. Well, going a little deeper here, we know that rebranding is a huge endeavor for distributors, both from operations, marketing, customer service, and it really is an all-hands-on-deck project to get everyone on the same page, especially when it involves moving on from a well-known name in the industry like ERIKS. So, Jeff, I'm curious just to go a little more here on learning what it took for LGG to accomplish this successful rebrand, which, as you noted, is a lot more than just updating the logo and signage. So this is a multi-layered question here, but can you take me through not just what it took for the company to update the look and feel of the company on the customer-facing front, but also what it took to get internally everyone on board and the top-down messaging it took to ensure that the company's values and value proposition were well understood and communicated?
Yeah, it certainly is a multi-functional project that cut across all aspects of the organization. I will say there were precious internal resources that had been through this before. We've rebranded the company Lewis Getz many years ago. We went through the rebranding of the company as ERIKS North America. So, from a project planning process map standpoint, we had a lot of internal experience in how to do this and the steps to take. So we weren't starting from scratch in that respect. I would say also there was a ton of excitement around developing our own identity and our own brand image. And so yeah, I can appreciate the fact that under certain circumstances, it's really a challenge to get all of the different internal stakeholders excited about the work it's going to take to do this. I don't think we had that hurdle to get over. We were very, as an organization, just thrilled to have an opportunity to move on, create this new identity, and so clearly we were communicating early and often about the need to do this and the excitement about doing it. We were communicating internally, as I already indicated, getting feedback on how we should think about the renaming convention, how we should think about the legacy brands and our path forward, and I think engaging the organization in that kind of feedback. And we've built a company that knows we love feedback and we listen hard and we act on it and think very hard about it. And as I indicated, I think it was internal feedback that led us to the conclusion that LGG Industrial was the right direction to go. So we had a lot of willing, excited participants engaged in the process. And so some of those, that just makes some of the hurdles in and of itself a lot easier to get over.
Yeah, enthusiasm from the staff definitely can make that a much easier process. So I want to switch gears here to tariffs, which have obviously been the biggest topic of discussion here in 2025 and figure to remain so for at least the rest of this year. And while I don't want to spend too much time talking tariffs since, as we've seen, the status of them can get quickly outdated, I was hoping you could touch on what navigating this tariffs experience has been like for the team there at LGG. I know a lot of distributors have past experience, some muscle memory with tariffs, but at the same time, this is kind of a whole different animal this time around. So just any thoughts on what this has been like for you and the team there, navigating everything going on with tariffs?
So just to give Roland a little bit of perspective here, we really don't import a tremendous amount of product as a percentage of our overall product cost. It's reasonably modest. And only a certain percentage of that, a small percentage of that, comes from China and some of the countries that are being harder hit by tariffs or targeted by tariffs, the 90-day pause notwithstanding. And so it's not as disruptive as it might otherwise be to other companies that are more dependent on that. But nevertheless, it's still a administrative logistical challenge and it doesn't help that it does change seemingly every 72 hours or every 2 weeks. So our focus is really on developing an internal process by which we can move quickly as things change. We think about this in terms of three buckets. What are the things that we're directly importing and have direct line of sight to? So the things that we're bringing in from East Asia, depending on the country, what's the tariff impact? How do we make sure that our systems are updated so that our folks are looking at appropriate costs and quoting customers appropriately? The second bucket is the indirect impacts, which is the impacts that our suppliers, that are domestic suppliers, but have imported components that ultimately go into the products that we buy. I don't want to say there was a blind spot there, but I don't think we paid that much attention to how much of a certain product comes from these countries when we're buying it from a domestic manufacturer. So we've learned a little bit about that impact, and not unlike our own direct exposure. That exposure is not huge, but it may be a little bit larger than we might have thought of otherwise. And then the third bucket is, what sort of competitive dislocation does this result in? Are we eyes wide open about the disadvantages that this presents to us that we need to address and think about? And are we aware of the advantages that we have being more domestically focused than import focused, and making sure that we understand those opportunities and are taking full advantage of them? But it's there's opportunities here, but it's been a disruptive exercise, even for somebody like us that doesn't have a tremendous amount of tariff impact. We still have to go through the process of making sure that we're updating the systems and passing along these cost increases, because that's what they are. These are cost increases that our suppliers ourselves are not in a position to absorb, and have to find ways to pass these on. And so we've tried to communicate transparently to the external market that there may be tariff impacts that we have to deal with, and to the extent that we're passing those on, we're finding ways to do that.
Well, that's some great background. The National Association for Hose and Accessories Distribution, known as NAHAD, hosted its annual convention, which is always a fantastic event, in this past mid-April in Tampa, Florida. There were great networking sessions there, and one thing that I noticed on the tariffs front, and this is just my observation as an editor, was that, kind of to your point, was the level of cost concern, the supply chain concern, wasn't quite as high as I've seen from some other distribution verticals when you look at metalworking products and other sources that have different components in them. And I think part of that is because the US hose market isn't quite as dependent on foreign sourcing, particularly from China, than it is for, say, electronics, PPE, and metal heavy verticals. So there were at least a few hose manufacturers there at the NAHAD convention that noted that either one, they had a relatively low reliance on China as a product source, or two, had so little steel or metal in their hose products that they just weren't really exposed to that particular tariff. So just going a little further on this, I'm not going to make you share any info that you don't want to for LGG, but anything further you can say about where the company sources its products from, or at least those in the hose and other industrial rubber products markets that LGG serves. I guess I'm just wondering, how difficult is it to further domesticate the supply chain for hose distributors, like the ones that you're involved with?
Yeah, I think to a certain extent, I would start the answer this way. Given the volatile nature of the conversations and how things are going to land, we're taking a bit of a wait and see approach. We're not disrupting our supply chain at this point until we have just greater visibility and clarity on the direction of tariffs. At 30% tariffs, certainly China is at a disadvantage compared to where it was 6 months ago. At 145% tariffs, it's a completely different conversation.
Yeah.
So until that gets sorted out, we're taking a bit of a wait and see. And for the most part, we've got secondary sources of supply already lined up once we get that clarity. I think, to a certain extent, we're going to watch very carefully for opportunities to domesticate some of the production. But I think the fallacy in some of this is that the production of some of these parts, the casting of metal parts, that capacity has moved offshore and has been offshore for a long time. And so we're not going to have the opportunity to domesticate some of these things for a very, very long time. And it's going to take much higher tariffs than the reciprocal tariffs that we're talking about to make that cost effective. And so, again, I think we've got a lot of sorting out and shaking out still to happen here before we have clarity on what to do. And regardless of where we end up, well, we would have to end up at a very different tariff point for some of these products and some of these manufacturing processes to make their way back to the U.S. and be competitive. And so I think it's if the intent is to bring some of this back to the U.S., the current reciprocal tariffs aren't going to be enough to do that. And I'm not sure that's necessarily what we want anyway. And so where we can buy domestic, it's certainly beneficial for us from a supply chain, from an inventory standpoint. The minute we're going offshore, that has inventory and working capital implications that we have to think about. but we've got to make good decisions from just a cost standpoint as well. Again, we're just not as exposed to it as others, so we can afford to take more of a wait and see here before we disrupt our supply chain.
Yeah.
But we're watching it very closely.
Yeah, that redomestication effort is very much a slow turning ship situation. So I want to get back to what's happening at LGG in terms of what you guys have been up to. A year ago, LGG detailed that it was investing in capabilities for its branch network that reflected consumer needs, which involved providing a boost for all its 70 plus branches across its North American network. And this, as LGG detailed, included expanding its gasket sealing solution capabilities with additional production equipment and expanding soft and metal gasket fabrication, enhancing metal material solutions with investments that support both heavyweight and lightweight conveyor systems, and increasing its industrial hose distribution expertise by adding a certified master coupler at nearly every branch location, along with adding larger capacity crimpers, metal hose fabrication, and better hose management capabilities. So that's a lot of enhancements. Is there any other areas of branch enhancements or upgrades that I didn't touch on there, or just anything else LGG has done, let's say over the past year or two, just boost its network?
Yeah, there's we seem to be embarking on large transformative initiatives all the time, but I think from a branch network investment and optimization standpoint, what you just reminded the listeners of is a pretty good recap. I think I would just summarize it by saying almost everything that we do involves changing the products that we buy in some way, shape, or form so the customer can use it. We're cutting a gasket, we're cutting and assembling industrial hose, hydraulic hose, and cutting and slitting and installing conveyor belt. And the only way to do that effectively is to be as close to the customer as we possibly can. Now, we've always got to be smart about how we deploy those capabilities and that working capital. And so we're trying to optimize the network at the same time that we're investing in it. But we believe very strongly in making sure that in every market we serve, we've got the appropriate kind of working capital and fabrication equipment as close to the customers as we possibly can. And that's an ongoing, never-ending effort to invest and optimize the network. But beyond that, we've made significant investments in our sales force, our go-to-market strategy. We've invested in the Sugar CRM platform in the last 6 or 7 months. So we've made tremendous investments in our sales force and how we think about, engage in, and manage the opportunity, the growth opportunity funnel that we have in front of us. And that's really starting to have a tremendous positive impact on the organic growth of the organization.
As far as those branch investments, can you touch on just what the results have been of all those upgrades that have been made across the network, or any customer feedback that you've had with those? Are customers noticing those enhancements, or anything you can touch on what the results of those, those branch enhancements have been?
And I want to, be clear. We haven't been making, investments across the entire network. Some branches were well situated with the working capital and the fabrication capabilities that they had. Some branches had not kept up, or in the prior ownership, perhaps working capital and productive capacity had been taken out of certain markets. So there's certain branches that we had targeted for revitalization over the last few years, and those branches are performing extraordinarily well. We chose those locations because of the market dynamics, competitive dynamics, the key customers that we had there or knew that we could grow with, and thought about those investments very carefully. And in those locations, we're having tremendous success.
That's great. And you already mentioned some of the digital enhancements that you guys have had, but yeah, that was going to be my next question. Was that's one thing we're always curious to learn about here at MDM is distributors, digital enhancements, strategic updates, and just innovation that they're rolling out. So if you don't mind recapping, are there any recent digital or technology developments out of LGG, or just anything that might be coming in the near future?
Yeah, I mentioned the Sugar CRM investment that we made across our entire organization. That's been the implementation of that was really successful, on budget, on time, and the rollout to the sales forces is going really well. Adoption is fantastic, and as I said, it's a tool that helps us manage the opportunity funnel that we have in front of us very effectively. We are also going through an ERP implementation in the base business. moving from one Epicor system, Prelude, to another Epicor system, Profit 21. We believe that's a system that's going to help us scale. We've done a couple of acquisitions in the last couple of years, both of those acquisitions already on the Profit 21 platform. So we think it's a great platform for us to be on and to facilitate the organic and inorganic growth that we expect to accomplish over the next several years.
Well, AI has become the focal point of the whole technology discussion and distribution. You can't go to a conference now without there being multiple sessions that are AI focused. And MDM has done plenty of research into AI adoption and use cases. And it's another one of those questions that we're always curious to ask leaders at any distributor about what they're doing with it. So can you touch on how LGG has approached AI so far in the organization?
Yeah, I wouldn't say we have an AI focused initiative, but I think maybe we're slow to adopt, but I believe we're on the cusp of doing exactly that and trying to understand how AI can be utilized to transform even more aspects of the organization and our operations and processes than perhaps we thought possible. We are using it in a number of back office operations, particularly in accounts payable, document management, and those sorts of things. We're starting to find some use cases in our marketing materials and marketing activities that's leading to the use cases around new markets, new customers, new applications. And so it's clearly something that has ubiquitous application throughout our organization, and we intend to be investing behind and thinking about how to utilize AI tools more broadly.
Well, that is all the planned questions I had for you, Jeff. But before we wrap up here, is there anything about LGG Industrial that we haven't touched on here that you think our audience, which is primarily consisting of distribution executives, anything that they should know about the company, or just any final thoughts?
Well, I just appreciate the opportunity to answer your questions and talk to your audience. We're very excited about the path that LGG Industrial is on, and you think about where we were 3 years ago. The transformation is pretty incredible. Initiatives that we've been able to undertake, and I say this with all sincerity, the amount of sort of transformative organization-wide initiatives that we've undertaken in the last couple of years is impressive. We're very proud of it. We're proud of the way in which we've been able to accomplish these things. Lots more work to do, and we're excited about it. But company's on a great path, and couldn't be prouder to work with the group of people that we do.
Yeah, you guys are just kind of in a nonstop state of busyness, which is great to see. So with that, thanks again, Jeff. This has been great catching up with you again, and thanks for joining the podcast.
Always a pleasure, Mike. Nice seeing you. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the MDM podcast. Like what you just heard, you can find all of our past episodes at mdm.com/podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.